Welcome to NibblePop Stories. Today we are going to learn the story of Tess of the Durbeyfields by Thomas Hardy. One evening in late May, a poor middle-aged peddler, Jack Durbeyfield, is walking home from Shaston to Marlott. On his way, he meets Parson Tringham, who surprises Jack by calling him Sir John. The parson explains that he has discovered Jack is a descendant of the noble de Urberville family, whose ancestor came to England with William the Conqueror. Jack learns that his family was once prominent and wealthy, but has declined over the centuries. They no longer have any estates or lands, only a distinguished history. The parson advises Jack to see this news as interesting history rather than something to act upon. Nevertheless, Jack is thrilled by the news. He asks a passing boy to run errands for him, calling himself Sir John de Urberville. He tells the boy to arrange for a carriage and a bottle of rum and to inform his wife that he has important news. At the same time, Jack's daughter, Tess, enjoys the May Day festivities with the other women from her village. The village of Marlott is situated in the beautiful Vale of Blakemore, just a 4-hour journey from London. The Vale of Blakemore has historical significance. It's connected to King Henry III. Traces of the past remain in old customs like the Maypole dance, a local tradition where women walk and dance in procession. While Tess is dancing with the other girls, 3 young men on a walking tour stop to watch them. The youngest is Angel. Angel decides to join the dance. The girls ask him to choose a partner and he selects a girl other than Tess. Tess feels disappointed. Even Angel, as he leaves, regrets not having danced with Tess. Tess shakes off her sadness once the stranger is out of sight. She starts to dance again. She stays with her friends until dusk. As night falls, she leaves the dance to go home. When she returns home, her mother, Joan, welcomes her with 2 pieces of news. Her father comes from a noble lineage and that he has been diagnosed with a serious heart condition. Tess learns that her father is at the pub, celebrating his newfound ancestry. Her mother goes to fetch him. Tess is left in charge of her younger siblings, Lisa Lou, Abraham, Hope, Modesty, and an unnamed 3-year-old baby. When her mother does not return, Tess first sends Abraham to retrieve their parents. But when he also does not return, Tess decides to go herself. When Tess's young brother arrives at the inn, he overhears their parents discussing plans for Tess. Joan wants to send Tess to the wealthy Mrs. de Urberville to claim kinship. She hopes it will bring the family good fortune. Eventually, Tess arrives to fetch her parents and they all head home together. Once home, Mrs. Durbeyfield tells Tess that her father cannot make the early morning journey to the market with the beehives. Tess decides to go instead, taking Abraham with her. They set off with the horse and wagon, and on the way, Abraham tells Tess about their parents' plans. Suddenly, their carriage collides with the local mail cart, killing their old horse, Prince. Tess is overcome with guilt. Devastated, she and Abraham wait for help. A farmer arrives to take their load to the market. Later, Tess returns home heartbroken. No one blames her more than she blames herself. The loss of Prince is a severe blow to the family's already unstable economic situation. To make up for the loss of the horse and her role in it, Tess finally agrees to seek help from the wealthy Mrs. de Urberville. The de Urberville mansion is located on the edge of an ancient forest called the Chase, but the estate itself appears modern and well maintained. Tess meets Alec, Mrs. de Urberville's son, who is captivated by her beauty, and he agrees to help her. Tess wants to meet Mrs. de Urberville, but Alec informs her that his mother is unwell and cannot see visitors. Alec then promises to find a place for Tess on their estate. When Tess returns home, she finds her mother excited because Mrs. de Urberville offers Tess a job managing her poultry farm. Tess is hesitant at first. She searches for other jobs closer to home but finds nothing. A week later, Mrs. de Urberville's son visits to confirm the job offer. Tess is still unsure, but she decides to accept the job to help her family. Her mother is hopeful that Tess might marry into the de Urberville family. On the morning of her departure, Tess wakes up before dawn. Her mother washes her hair, ties it with a pink ribbon, and dresses her in a white frock. As Tess prepares to leave, her mother decides to walk with her to the meeting point where a cart will pick her up. Her younger siblings are excited about Tess's potential marriage to a gentleman. Tess firmly tells them she is going to work, not marry. At the top of the hill, they see the cart. But then Tess notices a horse carriage approaching, driven by Alec. She feels uncertain. She hesitates to go with him. The children begin to cry. Eventually, Tess gets into the carriage and they drive off. As Tess disappears from view, her mother feels sad, but she tries to trust in fate. That night, she confides to her husband, worrying if sending Tess away was the right decision. However, she remains hopeful that Tess will succeed and perhaps marry well, believing in the power of her daughter's beauty. Alec drives Tess along the hill, but she becomes uneasy with the reckless driving. She asks him to slow down, but Alec insists on galloping. Tess holds onto Alec's waist for safety and asks him to stop. Alec demands a kiss to stop, and when Tess resists, he kisses her against her will. Tess wipes away the kiss, feeling ashamed and angry. She refuses to ride with him any further and continues on foot. Alec drives slowly alongside her. They approach her destination, the slopes, where the poultry farm and cottage await her. Tess is tasked with caring for a flock of fowls living in a cottage where the birds occupy the lower rooms. On her first morning, a servant from the manor house informs her that Mrs. de Urberville wants to see the birds. Tess learns that Mrs. de Urberville is a blind woman. Tess brings the birds to Mrs. de Urberville, who examines them by touch and expresses her hope that Tess will be kind to them. She also asks Tess to whistle tunes to train the birds. The next day, Tess practices whistling, and Alec offers to teach her. She is initially hesitant, but Tess eventually manages to produce a note. Over time, Tess becomes accustomed to Alec's presence. She finds whistling to the birds enjoyable and continues her duties diligently. In Trantridge, young women go to Chaseborough, a nearby town, every Saturday night to drink. Tess enjoys her first trip and keeps going back, sometimes alone, but always returning with a group for safety. During one visit, Tess waits for her friends to leave, but they keep dancing. Alec offers to help her get home, but she decides to wait for the other girls. When her friends are ready to leave, Tess finds some of them are drunk and jealous of Alec's attention to her. Cardarch confronts Tess, and a fight is about to start. At that moment, Alec offers Tess a ride home, providing an escape from the situation. Tess, having no other options, accepts Alec's offer. Alec and Tess ride away, and Tess starts to feel uncomfortable. Alec asks why she isn't more grateful to him. Tess admits that she doesn't love him. As they ride, Tess becomes drowsy from exhaustion and briefly falls asleep. When she wakes up, she realizes they are off the main road and Alec admits they are lost in the fog. He offers to find the path home while she waits with the horse. Alec ties up the horse and makes a nest of dead leaves for Tess. He mentions that he has bought a new horse for her father and some toys for her siblings. Tess feels grateful but conflicted, and when she realizes the depth of Alec's passion for her, she starts to cry. Alec tries to comfort her, wraps her in his overcoat, and then goes off into the woods. When Alec finally returns, he finds Tess asleep with tears on her cheeks. He takes advantage of the situation and rapes her. A month later, Tess leaves Trantridge and her job, carrying a heavy basket and bundle. As she reaches the ridge, she sees a cart approaching. It's Alec, who scolds her for leaving quietly and offers to drive her the rest of the way. Tess accepts with reluctance. When they near the village, Tess begins to cry, regretting her life choices. Alec tries to console her, but Tess rejects his advances and insists she will not accept any more help from him. As they part ways, Alec asks for a farewell kiss, which Tess reluctantly gives. When she finally reaches her home, her mother is surprised to see her. Tess tells her everything, expressing shame and sorrow over what happened. Her mother is disappointed that Tess did not secure a marriage with Alec. She laments the missed opportunity for the family. Tess blames her mother for not warning her. Her mother says they must make the best of the situation. Tess Durbeyfield's return to Marlott becomes a topic of gossip. When she goes to church, she notices people staring and whispering about her. She realizes the tough journey ahead and confines herself to her shared bedroom, watching the changing weather through the thatch roof. Tess feels most at ease when she walks out at dusk. She prefers the solitude of the woods. She struggles with feelings of shame and alienation, believing she has broken social norms. Tess gives birth to a baby. The following August, she decides to stop pitying herself and returns to fieldwork after a long seclusion. She works alongside others. During the lunch break, Tess's sister brings the child to her. She unwraps and nurses the baby. After lunch, she resumes work until dusk, then rides home with the other workers. When she returns home, she finds her baby has fallen ill. She desperately tries to save it, but realizes the baby is dying and has not been baptized. In the middle of the night, Tess baptizes her baby herself, naming it Sorrow. The baby dies in the morning, and Tess arranges for a secret burial in the churchyard. She makes a small cross for the grave and places flowers on it. Tess realizes she can never be happy in Marlott and longs to start a new life where no one knows her. She waits a long time for an opportunity, and in May, she receives a letter about a milkmaid position at a dairy at Talbothays, far to the south. Although it's not as far as she wished, it feels distant enough for a fresh start. Tess resolves to leave her D'Urberville past behind and live simply as a dairymaid. Tess Durbeyfield leaves home for the second time. Despite her eagerness to leave, she looks back regretfully at Marlott and her father's house. Tess's family will continue their lives with little change. Her siblings will resume their games, barely noticing her absence. Tess believes leaving is for the best, as her presence might do more harm than good. The walk to the dairy is more challenging than she expected, taking 2 hours due to wrong turns. When she finally sees the valley of the great dairies, the larger fields, extensive farms, and numerous cattle present a new sight to her. The clear, refreshing air lifts her spirits, and she feels a sense of hope and joy. Tess arrives at the dairy around milking time. In the long thatched sheds, cows are being milked. Tess feels a renewed sense of purpose and contentment in her new surroundings. Richard Crick, the head dairyman, treats Tess kindly and offers her a chance to rest, but Tess insists on starting work immediately. Crick knows a bit about the Durbeyfields, but Tess has lost interest in her family lineage. She begins milking with the other workers. One of the men at the dairy looks familiar to Tess, and she realizes he is the man she noticed at the May Day village dance in Marlott. That evening, Tess overhears the dairymaids discussing him and learns that he is Angel Clare, the son of a respected Wessex clergyman. Unlike his two brothers who joined the church, Angel prefers a life in agriculture and has come to the dairy to gain practical experience. There is much talk about Angel among the dairymaids, many of whom seem to have a crush on him. Mr. Clare, Angel's father, remarried late in life and had 3 sons with his second wife. Although Angel is the most gifted of the 3 brothers, he did not attend university like his siblings. His father viewed university as preparation for a clerical life, but Angel, doubting the doctrines of the church, felt it would be dishonest to join the clergy and decided not to go to Cambridge. Angel is now 26. He is learning about farming and dairy work firsthand. He is gentlemanly and thoughtful, and most of the dairy workers treat him as a superior. He despises the distinctions of rank and wealth. He initially acts aloof and shy, but soon befriends the other workers and spends more time with them. He quickly becomes captivated by Tess's beauty. Tess, however, tries to avoid him due to the shame of her hidden, sorrowful past. Angel finds Tess fascinating and somewhat familiar, although he cannot recall where he might have seen her before. This familiarity leads him to favor Tess over the other dairymaids. The dairy cows have their favorite milkers and will only stand for them. Crick tries to break these habits by rotating the milkers. Tess discovers that Angel is secretly lining up her favorite cows for her, breaking the dairy's rules. She confronts him about it, and later that night she walks alone in the garden. She listens to him play his harp. He joins her, and they have an intimate conversation. Angel is surprised by the depth of Tess's thoughts, while Tess is interested in Angel's education and learning. They find each other intriguing, though neither fully understands the other's background. Tess worries that Angel might think less of her because of her past. She considers telling him about her noble heritage, but she decides against it after learning he disregards old family distinctions. As the months pass, Angel and Tess grow closer, and Tess finds herself in the happiest phase of her life. They wake up early before the others, feeling as if they are the only people on earth. The dairy seems like an Eden, with Angel as Adam and Tess as Eve. To Angel, Tess is the visionary essence of woman. Life at the dairy begins to change when the butter stops churning properly. Mrs. Crick jokes that this only happens when someone falls in love. In fact, two people are in love. The milkmaids frequently talk about Angel's obvious affection for Tess. However, Tess is hesitant to marry because she is still ashamed of her past. It is July, and Tess has been at Talbothays for 2 months. One Sunday, she and three other maids head to church. On the way, they find the road flooded. They encounter Angel, who offers to carry them across the water. He carries the first three maids, leaving Tess for last to have some time alone with her. Tess feels a mix of embarrassment and excitement, but initially refuses, thinking Angel must be tired. Angel reassures her that he carried the others just to have the chance to carry her. Angel gently carries Tess, who is anxious about her feelings for him. Once across, the girls realize that Angel favors Tess. Marian comments that the other girls don't stand a chance against Tess. Tess promises she will never come between the other girls and Angel. July passes. One morning, while Tess is milking her cow and gazing into the meadow, Angel watches her closely and intently. After a few moments, he suddenly embraces her. Tess is completely surprised, but she yields to his embrace. Angel halts before kissing her, apologizing for not asking and begging for forgiveness. Tess begins to cry, and Angel declares his love for her. As evening falls, Angel feels restless. Since their unexpected embrace, he and Tess have avoided each other. Angel understands that Tess deserves to be treated with respect, not as a fleeting fancy. To gain perspective, he decides to visit his family, leaving early one morning without informing anyone. His departure saddens the dairy workers, especially the four women who care deeply for him. When Angel arrives at his parents' home, they and his brothers notice the changes in him. During breakfast, Angel reflects on the possibility of marrying Tess. Angel first talks with his father about his plans to become a farmer, and his father offers him money to buy land. Angel then mentions the need for a wife who knows farm work, such as milking cows and making butter. His mother suggests Mercy, a devout and respectable woman, but Angel insists on needing someone with practical farming skills. He describes Tess as honest, intelligent, religious, and beautiful, though she comes from a humble background. Angel's parents express a desire to meet Tess. Angel returns to Talbothays' farm in the afternoon. After feeding his horse, he hears Tess coming down the stairs. She is surprised and happy to see him. They go to the milk house together, where Angel offers to help with the skimming. While walking, he takes her in his arms and asks her to marry him. Tess admits she loves him, but says she cannot marry. Angel tells her he will give her time to think it over. They continue skimming in silence, with Tess struggling emotionally. Angel is not discouraged by Tess's refusal. He thinks it might eventually change to a yes. He doesn't realize Tess's refusal is serious. Tess insists she is not good enough for him. But Angel reassures her. He says that his parents would accept her. When Angel asks if she loves someone else, Tess replies that she loves only him but can't marry him for his own good. Tess feels she cannot marry Angel because of her past, but Angel believes her objections are due to her low social status, and he thinks she will eventually accept. Tess feels she must tell Angel about her background and her dark past. The farm buzzes with gossip about a failed marriage. Jack married a widow, hoping to gain her large dowry, but he soon discovered that her financial stability and income vanished as a result of the marriage. Most people believe the widow deceived Jack and that she should have been honest with him before marrying. This widespread opinion makes Tess anxious about her own past and how she should reveal it to Angel. In the fading daylight, Angel and Tess travel along the flat road through the meadows, with the dark slopes of Egdon Heath in the distance. As they move down the quiet lane, Angel occasionally picks blackberries for Tess. Soon, it starts to rain, and they huddle under a piece of sailcloth. Tess begins to share her story, mentioning her family's troubles and her connection to the Durbeyfields. Angel listens and reassures her that her past won't change his feelings. He thinks her heritage will even please his parents. Despite her worries, Tess eventually agrees to marry Angel, moved by his love and persistence. Tess asks if she may write to her mother. When Angel learns she is from Marlott, he remembers where he has seen her before, May Day, when they did not dance. Tess writes to her mother the next day. Her mother quickly responds. She advises Tess not to tell Angel about her past. When Angel announces their engagement to Mr. Crick in front of the dairymaids, Tess is touched by their joyous reaction. She realizes she must tell Angel everything about her past, even if it risks losing him. She feels that keeping it a secret would be a betrayal to him and unfair to her friends. As autumn turns to November, Angel and Tess continue spending time together in the fields and taking evening walks to check on the cows. During these walks, they discuss their upcoming marriage and decide to leave the dairy around Christmas, setting their wedding date for December 31st. Angel arranges a marriage license and gets a dress, gloves, and a handkerchief for Tess. Angel plans a trip with Tess to the nearest town to shop together. On Christmas Eve, they set out to town. There, they encounter two men from Trantridge, one of whom insults Tess by linking her to her past affair. Angel punches him, and the man apologizes, claiming he made a mistake. That night, feeling guilty, Tess writes a confession and slips it under Angel's door. When Angel acts normally the next morning, Tess believes he might have forgiven her. However, she later realizes the letter got stuck under the carpet. She destroys it, deciding to keep her past a secret for now. They prepare for the wedding with excitement and nervousness. None of Angel's family attends the wedding. His parents are disappointed with his choice of a bride, and his brothers have not responded. Tess's family and friends from Marlott are also absent. The dairyman and his wife accompany them to church, and they are married. After the wedding, the couple travels to the old D'Urberville mansion to spend a few days alone. Tess receives a package from Angel's father containing jewelry left by Angel's godmother for his future wife. Their luggage arrives late, brought by Jonathan, who also shares distressing news about the dairymaids. Retty attempted suicide and Marion got drunk. Feeling guilty, Tess sits by the fire with Angel. Suddenly, Angel makes a heartfelt confession about a past mistake, seeking her forgiveness. He reveals that, while in London, he had an affair with an older woman and spent 48 hours with her. Tess is somewhat relieved. She shares her own troubling confession about her past with Alec de Urbeville. Angel is deeply troubled by Tess's confession. He finds it impossible to forgive, and he feels that she has become a different person to him. He questions her character and their future together. Needing time to think, he leaves the room. Feeling lost and desperate, Tess follows him outside. They walk in silence, with Tess attempting to convince Angel of her unchanged love. He tells her to return to the house. When he comes back, Tess is already asleep. Angel then goes to sleep in a different room. At dawn, Angel wakes up and sends away the servant, deciding to make breakfast himself. When Tess joins him, he asks about Alec. Tess tells him the baby has died, but Alec is still alive. Tess suggests a divorce, but Angel explains it isn't legally possible. He says things would be different if Alec were dead and claims that no matter where they go, her past will eventually come out. Feeling guilty, Tess proposes to go home. Angel adds that he will also go away, as he thinks more positively of people when apart from them. They both pack up to leave. That night, Tess wakes up and finds Angel sleepwalking. He stumbles into her room, takes her in his arms, and moaning that his wife is dead, carries her over a narrow bridge into the churchyard where he lays her in an empty stone coffin. Tess carefully leads Angel back into the house, and by morning, he has no memory of the event. The next morning, Angel decides to leave Tess. He asks her to stay with her mother while he tries to come to terms with their situation. Heartbroken, Tess agrees. They part ways, and Angel watches her leave. As Tess approaches her house, she is met by an old school friend who asks about her husband. Tess says he was called away on business. When Tess sees her mother, she is surprised and asks where her husband is. Tess breaks down and explains that he left her after she confessed about Alec. Her mother calls her foolish, but Tess insists she couldn't deceive him. The next morning, Tess's father learns the truth and is shocked. Tess feels she can't stay long at home and leaves a few days later, using a letter from her husband as an excuse. She gives her mother money to maintain the illusion of a stable marriage, hoping her parents believe she is joining her husband. Angel goes to his parents' house 3 weeks after the wedding. On the way, he sees an advertisement for emigrating to Brazil and becomes interested in the idea. He thinks about starting a new life there and possibly bringing Tess later. He explains his plans to his parents, and his mother is shocked that Tess is not with him. Angel explains that Tess is staying at her parents' home while he prepares for his journey to Brazil. During supper, his mother expresses her disappointment at not meeting Tess, but Angel assures them they will meet her in a year when he returns. Angel deposits Tess's jewels in the bank and arranges to send her money later. He writes to Tess about his plans and instructs her to contact his father in an emergency. He encounters Iz and impulsively invites her to go to Brazil with him. Iz agrees and confesses her love for him. When he asks if she loves him more than Tess, Iz replies that no one could love him as much as Tess did. Realizing his mistake, Angel apologizes. Feeling sad and almost deciding to return to Tess, he ultimately continues with his plan. He takes a train to London and 5 days later leaves for Brazil. 8 months have passed since Claire and Tess parted. Tess is now alone with very little money, carrying a basket and bundle. After leaving her home in Marlott, she spent the spring and summer working irregularly at a dairy near Port Bredy. Her temporary dairy work ends with the milk season and she moves to harvest work. She sends some money to her mother, who writes about their desperate situation at home. Tess avoids contacting Claire's parents for more money due to pride and shame. As the autumn rains continue, Tess finds it hard to get work. With her savings nearly gone, she decides to work in an upland farm. On her way there, Tess stumbles upon a flock of peasants, some dead and some injured, shot by hunters. She feels an affinity for the birds in pain and kills them to put them out of their misery. Afterward, she compares her own plight with that of the pheasants and becomes angry at herself for dwelling on her own miseries. She reaches Chalk Newton and has breakfast in an inn. Several young men compliment her looks. To avoid unwanted attention, Tess decides to disguise her appearance. She changes into an old field gown, covers her face with a handkerchief, and even cuts off her eyebrows to make herself less attractive. Now she looks like a simple field worker, wearing old, weather-beaten clothes. The next day, she moves from farm to farm seeking work. She encounters her friend Marian, who is shocked by Tess's condition. Tess explains her disguise and her reluctance to reveal her marriage status. Marian helps Tess get a job at the farm, warning her about the tough work ahead. Tess finds a place to stay and writes to her parents about her new address, hoping for a letter from Angel. The farm at Flintcombe Ash is neglected by its lord and managed by the villagers. Tess joins Marian in the fields, working hard with all her patience and courage. They talk about their time at Talbothays, and Marian decides to write to Iz and Retty. Iz agrees to join them. In the winter, they are sent to work in the barn. Tess is shocked to find that their employer is Farmer Groby, the same man from Trantridge who had made her uncomfortable and with whom Angel had fought to defend her honor. During a break, Marion reveals that Angel had asked Iz to go to Brazil with him. Tess blames herself, feeling she should have written to Angel more often. Upset by Iz's story, Tess feels compelled to act. She wonders why Angel hasn't written to her and considers reaching out to his family. 2 weeks later, she sets off to meet Angel's parents, hoping to win over his mother and get her help in reuniting with him. As she nears Eminster, she changes into her pretty shoes. She rings the doorbell and realizes everyone is at church. She walks to the churchyard, hoping to wait until the service ends. She sees Angel's brothers approaching and hears them talking about Angel's unfortunate marriage. Her distress increases when she hears them wish Angel had married Mercy Chant instead of her. Feeling humiliated and hopeless, Tess decides it is useless to visit the vicarage now. On her way back, Tess feels like a failure. She pauses in a village where a preacher is speaking in a barn. To her shock, she recognizes the voice as Alec de Durbeyfield's. Tess has not seen Alec since she left Trantridge. When she encounters him again, she is struck with sudden terror. She tries to withdraw, but Alec notices her and runs after her. He insists he needs to save her soul. Tess tells him about their child and he is disturbed to realize he knew nothing about this. Alec explains that he has found God through the influence of Reverend Clare, Angel's father. Tess wonders how people like Alec ruin others' lives and then try to secure a place in heaven by converting others. Alec tries to assure her of his intentions and even accuses Tess of being the one who could tempt him into sin. He asks her to veil her face and make a holy vow not to lead him into sin. Reluctantly, she obeys, and he leaves, promising to pray for her. After they part, Tess learns that the cross he asked to swear upon is not a holy site, but a former site of torture. A few days later, Alec arrives at the farm with a marriage license. He admits that what he did to Tess was the worst sin he ever committed and asks her to marry him. Tess tells him she is already married. Alec is shocked and says that she has been abandoned by her husband. Later, Alec visits Tess at her cottage. He confesses that he can't forget her and asks her to pray for him. Tess, influenced by Angel's beliefs, says she doesn't believe prayer can change God's plans. Alec feels conflicted, torn between his religious duties and his feelings for Tess. He calls her a temptress and blames her for his inability to stop thinking about her. Tess asks him to leave her in peace. In early spring, Tess is assigned to work as a thresher on a farm. Alec reappears. He says that he is no longer a preacher and asking Tess to run away with him. He admits that his love for her has grown stronger. He feels sorry that her husband neglects her. Tess slaps him with a leather glove. Though initially angry, Alec calms down and says that he is her true husband. He tells her he will return in the afternoon to take her away. Alec returns that afternoon as promised. He walks Tess home and asks her to trust him to take care of both her and her family. Tess refuses his offers again. That night, she writes a letter to Angel, confessing her loyalty and love and asking for his help to resist Alec's temptation. Tess's letter is sent to Angel's parents, who then forward it to Angel in Brazil. Meanwhile, Angel has been struggling with health issues in Brazil. There, he met an experienced man who viewed Angel's treatment of Tess as extremely harsh. He told him that his wife's past was irrelevant. Angel starts thinking about Tess, recalling her singing, beauty, and love for him. He reconsiders his farming plans in Brazil. The hardships he has faced have softened his feelings towards Tess. Meanwhile, back at the farm, Tess's sister, Lisa Lou, visits with bad news. Their mother is dying and their father is very ill and unable to work. Tess leaves for home the next morning. She nurses her mother and tends the farm. As Joan begins to recover, Alec reappears, offering help. He assists Tess in the field and tells her he would take care of her. He says that if her mother dies, the children will need help. Tess refuses again. Alec gets frustrated and returns. Meanwhile, Tess's father dies from an existing heart condition. This means the family must vacate their house, which was leased to her father. Tess gets ready to move her family to Kingspear. Alec tries to convince Tess to move them to his family's garden home, promising to send her siblings to school and let her mother tend the fowls. Tess is tempted, but declines Alec's offer once more. As Alec leaves, Tess admits to herself that Angel has treated her poorly. She writes Angel a letter saying she will try to forget him since she can never forgive him. The next day, Tess and her family set out on their journey. Upon reaching Kingsbear, they discover that the rooms have already been rented out. They take shelter at the tomb, despite Alec's repeated offer to care for John and the children. In her despair, she laments being on the wrong side of the tomb. Meanwhile, Iz and Marion write to Angel, informing him that Tess is in danger from Alec and that his neglect has left her in an impossible situation. A few more days pass, and Angel returns to his parents' home. He reads Tess's angry letter and worries that she will never forgive him. After spending a few days at home, regaining his strength, he writes a letter to Tess addressed to Marlott. He eventually receives a reply from Tess's mother, informing him that they have left Marlott and that Tess is no longer with the family. Angel learns that Tess did not use any of the money he left with his father. He realizes she must have endured great poverty while he was abroad. Overcome with pity and guilt, Angel decides to find her. As he is preparing, he receives a letter from Iz and Marion informing him of Tess's dire situation and state of mind. Angel sets out to find Tess, traveling through Flintcombe Ash and Marlott. He learns of Tess's father's death and finds his gravestone. When he meets Joan, his mother-in-law, he finds her reluctant to disclose Tess's whereabouts. Upon offering financial help, she assures him they are provided for. She eventually reveals that Tess is living in Sanborn, though she doesn't know the exact address. In Sanborn, Angel cannot find a Mrs. Clare or a Miss Durbeyfield. He discovers that a D'Urberville is staying at an upscale lodging called the Herons. He wonders how Tess could afford such a place. When he finally meets Tess, she is dressed in expensive clothes. Angel pleads for her forgiveness, saying he has learned to accept her and desperately wants her back. Tess responds that it is too late. She has given in to Alec d'Urberville's desires and is now under his protection. Tess leaves the room and Angel rushes out of the house. Mrs. Brooks, the landlady at the Herons, spies on Tess through the keyhole. She sees Tess holding her head in her hands, accusing Alec of deceiving her into believing Angel would never return for her. Back in her own room, Mrs. Brooks sees Tess leave through the front gate and disappear onto the street. Shortly after, she notices a dark red spot spreading on the ceiling. Terrified, she has a workman open the door, where they find Alec lying on the bed, stabbed to death. The news of Alec's murder quickly spreads through the town. Angel decides to leave on the first train. As he hikes out of the valley, he sees Tess running after him. He draws her off the main road and she tells him that she has killed Alec. Tess explains she had to kill Alec because he wronged Angel and that she only went to Alec because Angel left her. She begs for Angel's forgiveness. Angel is horrified by her actions but also thrilled that she did it out of love for him. He promises to protect her. They leave together. They know that this is just a brief pause before the inevitable happens, and a permanent escape or life together is not possible. For 5 days, Angel and Tess stay together, sheltering in a vacant house, occasionally visited by a caretaker. When it's time to move on, Angel considers escaping by ship, but Tess senses her end is near. Seeking a place to rest, They arrive at Stonehenge. Tess rests against a pillar and tells Angel it feels as though they are the only people in the world. She asks him to take care of Lisa Lou after she is gone. She asks Angel if he believes they will meet again after death. Angel does not respond, leaving Tess upset as she drifts off to sleep. At dawn, they find themselves surrounded by men. Angel asks them to wait until Tess wakes up. When Tess awakens, she feels a sense of relief, glad that she will not continue living, feeling unworthy of Angel's love. Days pass. Angel and Lisa Lou walk hand in hand out of Wintoncester, the capital city of Wessex. A black flag flies over an ugly building, indicating an execution has taken place. Tess has been put to death. Angel and Lisa Lou stand motionless for a while, then join hands and continue walking. So that brings us to the end of Tess's story. Do let us know in the comment section. And if you like listening to stories from us, subscribe to our channel and write in the comments which story you want us to tell you about. This is Monami Mukherjee signing off. Good night.